I'm Allison, 34, and I always thought I understood what family meant until my brother Ethan's engagement party last spring. I was standing near the champagne fountain, smiling and clapping as my father raised his glass. "Son, we're so proud of you," Dad announced, pulling an envelope from his jacket. "Here's the deed to the apartment. It's all yours now." My heart stopped. That apartment, the one I'd secretly contributed $30,000 toward as a family investment. My champagne glass nearly slipped from my trembling fingers as realization dawned. My own father had just given away something I'd helped pay for without even acknowledging my sacrifice. Before I dive into this story, where are you watching from? Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted. Trust me, what happened next will show you exactly how family dynamics can hide beneath the surface until one moment changes everything. Let me back up and paint the complete picture of my family and how we got to that devastating moment at the engagement party. I've always been the responsible one. As a financial analyst at Berkshire Financial, I've worked my way up over the past decade through discipline and hard work. Just 3 months before the engagement party, I'd received a promotion to senior analyst that came with a nice salary bump. I've always been careful with money, tracking expenses in detailed spreadsheets, maximizing my 401k contributions, and steadily building my savings account. Financial independence has been my goal since watching my college roommate struggle with debt after her parents cut her off without warning. My brother Ethan is another story entirely. 2 years younger than me at 32, he's always been the golden child, charming, outgoing, and my father's obvious favorite. While I was working overtime and taking night classes to advance my career, Ethan was bouncing between startup ideas, a food delivery app that failed within 6 months, a cryptocurrency venture that mysteriously dissolved, and most recently, a lifestyle coaching business with exactly 3 clients. Despite these failures, Dad always speaks about Ethan's entrepreneurial spirit and visionary thinking. And more importantly, Dad always bails him out financially. Our father, George, built a successful construction business from scratch. He's proud, stubborn, and has very traditional views about family. In his mind, Ethan will someday take over the family business, though Ethan has shown zero interest or aptitude for construction. Dad sees himself in Ethan, or rather, sees what he wants to see. With me, it's different. He respects my financial stability, but often dismisses my achievements with comments like, "That's nice, sweetheart," before quickly changing the subject to Ethan's latest venture. Mom, Linda, tries to balance Dad's obvious favoritism. She calls me privately to congratulate me on work achievements and always remembers my birthday with thoughtful gifts. But in family settings, she rarely contradicts Dad. Years of marriage to his domineering personality have made her the family peacekeeper rather than an equal partner in parenting decisions. Then there's Samantha, Ethan's fiancée. The daughter of a prominent surgeon, she comes from money and expects to maintain that lifestyle. When she and Ethan started dating 2 years ago, it became obvious that Ethan's modest apartment wouldn't impress her or her parents. That's when Dad started talking about helping Ethan move to a better neighborhood. The apartment in question sits in Westlake Heights, an upscale area Ethan could never afford on his inconsistent income. 3 bedrooms, a gourmet kitchen, and a balcony with city views. It screams success in a way Ethan's actual career didn't. The purchase price was $480,000, well beyond Ethan's means. 8 months ago, Dad called me for coffee at our usual spot, Riverside Cafe. He seemed unusually serious as he stirred his black coffee. "Allison, I need your help with something important," he said, his voice low. "I'm putting together funds for an apartment for Ethan. It's a solid investment in a growing area. The family will own it together, but Ethan will live there for now. I'm short about $30,000, and I know you've been saving." I hesitated, thinking about the down payment I'd been accumulating for my own place. I was only about $15,000 away from my goal after years of careful saving. "Dad, that's a lot of money," I said carefully. "I've been saving for my own place." He reached across and patted my hand. "This is a family investment, Allie. Your money won't disappear. It's going into a property that will appreciate. We'll put everything in writing. Besides, you're doing so well, and Ethan needs this boost right now. Samantha's parents are already asking questions about his living situation. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I transferred $30,000 to my father the next day with the understanding that I would have partial ownership in the property. There was never any formal documentation, just my father's word, which until the engagement party, I had never had reason to doubt. Meanwhile, I continued living in my modest one-bedroom apartment in Riverdale, taking the bus to work while Ethan drove the BMW Dad had helped him lease. I told myself the sacrifice was temporary. The apartment was a family investment, and my contribution would come back to me with interest someday. In the months leading up to the engagement party, Ethan and Samantha became increasingly focused on crafting the perfect image. Ethan's social media suddenly featured business meetings at upscale restaurants. Samantha began referring to him as my successful entrepreneur in Instagram captions. The apartment became their showpiece, though Ethan rarely mentioned that Dad had financed most of it. I postponed my own home purchase plans, telling myself I was being a supportive sister. I even helped Ethan furnish the place, finding deals on quality furniture through my network. When Ethan proposed to Samantha with a diamond ring that I knew he couldn't afford, I suspected Dad had helped with that too, but I kept quiet. Family helps family, right? The week before the engagement party, I spent hours helping Mom with preparations, despite a crucial deadline at work. I stayed up until 2 a.m. finishing my project, then was up at 7 a.m. to pick up the custom cake Ethan and Samantha wanted. No one thanked me. It was expected. Allison always handles the details. Little did I know that my years of being the reliable, supportive daughter and sister were about to culminate in the most painful betrayal of my life. The engagement party was held at Bellevue Gardens, a venue so expensive I had raised my eyebrows when Ethan mentioned it. Don't worry, he'd winked. Dad's taking care of it. Of course he was. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over round tables draped in champagne-colored silk. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Floral arrangements of white roses and hydrangeas adorned every surface, Samantha's preference, which I knew cost a fortune. I'd spend the morning helping the event coordinator arrange seating cards and gift bags, ensuring everything was perfect despite running on 4 hours of sleep. Samantha's family had shown up in force. Her father, Dr. Wilson, in his custom suit, her mother dripping in diamonds, and at least 20 extended family members who all seemed to have perfect teeth and expensive watches. Our side was smaller. Some of Dad's business associates, Mom's book club friends, and a handful of cousins we only saw at major events. Ethan looked handsome in his tailored suit, his arm constantly around Samantha's waist as they accepted congratulations. I wore a blue dress I'd found on clearance and styled my hair myself, feeling somewhat out of place amid all the opulence, but happy for my brother nonetheless. The first hour passed pleasantly enough. I chatted with cousins, complimented Samantha's parents on their daughter, and kept Mom's wine glass filled as she fluttered nervously between conversations. Dad held court near the bar, telling his typical larger-than-life stories to anyone who would listen. Then came time for the speeches. Mom went first, teary-eyed and emotional, welcoming Samantha to the family. Samantha's father followed with an elegant speech about marriage and commitment that sounded partially rehearsed. Several friends offered embarrassing stories and well wishes. Finally, Dad stepped to the center of the room, champagne glass raised high. The room quieted immediately. George Taylor had a commanding presence after decades of running construction sites. When Ethan was just a boy, he began, his voice booming without a microphone, I knew he was destined for greatness. He's always had vision, always reached for the stars. I smiled politely, though my mind flashed to Ethan's third failed business and the time Dad had to pay off his credit card debt after a disastrous investment in artisanal coffee futures. My son has become the man I always knew he could be, Dad continued. A successful entrepreneur, a man respected in his field, and now, a man about to build his own family with the beautiful Samantha. The exaggerations were flowing freely now. I caught Mom's eye across the room, and she gave a small shrug as if to say, "You know your father. Ethan has worked hard to create a foundation for his future," Dad said, conveniently forgetting the foundation was largely built with his checkbook. "And today, I want to give him something to cement that foundation." Dad reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. My curiosity piqued. Perhaps a generous check for the wedding? That would be typical. "Son, I'm proud to give you this," Dad said, his voice thick with emotion as he handed Ethan the envelope. "The deed to your apartment, officially and completely in your name. No strings, no loans to repay. It's yours, free and clear. You deserve this beautiful home to start your life with, Samantha." The room erupted in applause. Samantha squealed and threw her arms around Ethan's neck. My brother looked stunned, then broke into a wide grin as he embraced our father. I stood frozen, champagne glass halfway to my lips. The deed? In Ethan's name only? Free and clear? My $30,000 gone. Just like that. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears as memories flashed through my mind. Dad at Riverside Cafe, assuring me this was a family investment. The bank transfer notification. The text from Dad afterward. "Thanks, Sally. This means a lot. The family always takes care of its own." I felt a cold sweat break out across my back as I tried to process what had just happened. Had Dad forgotten my contribution? No, that wasn't possible. He'd simply decided my money was a gift to Ethan, not the investment he'd promised. I watched as Ethan proudly showed the deed to Samantha's father, who nodded approvingly. They had no idea I'd contributed a penny. In their minds, this was all Dad's generosity. I placed my glass on a nearby table before I dropped it, my fingers suddenly numb. Dad was now receiving congratulatory slaps on the back for his generosity. Mom was dabbing her eyes with a tissue. No one was looking at me. I needed air. Moving as naturally as possible, I made my way toward the venue's terrace doors, slipping outside into the cool evening. My hands gripped the stone balustrade as I took deep breaths, trying to calm the nausea rising in my stomach.
$30,000.
Almost 2 years of aggressive saving. Gone without acknowledgement. The door opened behind me, and I quickly straightened, wiping away the tear that had escaped. "There you are." It was Dad, jubilant and slightly flushed from whiskey and praise. "What did you think of my surprise?" Ethan was blown away. I turned to face him, struggling to keep my voice level. "Dad, that apartment, I contributed $30,000 to it. You said it was a family investment." His expression flickered for just a moment before settling into dismissive reassurance. "Oh, Allie, don't worry about that now. We're celebrating. We can talk business another time." "But Dad, you just gave away something I partially paid for," I insisted, my voice rising slightly despite my efforts to stay calm. He frowned, glancing over his shoulder to ensure we were alone. "Keep your voice down. This isn't the time or place. We'll sort it out later, I promise." He patted my shoulder. "Now come back inside and be happy for your brother. Don't make this about you." Before I could respond, Samantha's mother appeared at the door. "George, the photographer wants a family picture." Dad gave me a warning look before plastering on a smile. "Coming, Judith." "Allison, we'll be right in." I stood alone on the terrace, the magnitude of the betrayal washing over me. This wasn't just about money, it was about value. My contributions, financial and otherwise, meant nothing compared to Ethan's happiness. I returned to the party on autopilot, smiling mechanically for photos, declining offers to dance. At 10:30, I made my excuses, claiming an early meeting the next day. "But we haven't cut the cake," Samantha protested, clearly annoyed that anyone would leave our celebration early. "I'm so sorry, I really can't stay," I said, kissing her cheek and then Ethan's. "Congratulations again." Ethan was too swept up in his good fortune to notice anything amiss. "Thanks for coming, sis. Isn't Dad the best? I never expected this." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further, and made my escape. In my car, the facade crumbled. Tears streamed down my face as I pounded the steering wheel. All the years of being the responsible one, the reliable daughter, had earned me nothing but being taken for granted. I'd been naive to trust Dad's word without documentation, but the betrayal cut deeper than the financial loss. My own father had dismissed my contribution as if it meant nothing. I drove home in a daze, mascara streaking my cheeks, wondering how I could face my family again, and whether I even wanted to. The days following the engagement party were a blur of emotional turmoil. I called in sick to work on Monday, something I'd done only twice in my career, unable to face colleagues or spreadsheets, while my mind kept replaying Dad's cavalier dismissal of my concerns. I called Dad multiple times, each call going straight to voicemail. My texts received brief, evasive responses. Busy at the site today. Let's talk this weekend. You're making too much of this, Allie. By Wednesday, I'd returned to work, but was functioning on autopilot. My boss, Janet, noticed my distraction during our team meeting and pulled me aside afterward. Everything okay, Allison? You missed a calculation error on the Dempsey projections that isn't like you. I apologized and blamed lack of sleep, unwilling to expose my family drama at work. That evening, I finally reached Mom on the phone. Mom, did you know Dad was giving Ethan full ownership of the apartment? The one I contributed $30,000 to. A long silence followed before she sighed heavily. I found out the morning of the party, Allison. I told him he should discuss it with you first, but you know your father once he gets an idea in his head. But Mom, that was my money. He promised it was a family investment. My voice cracked with emotion. I know, sweetheart. It wasn't right. Another pause. Your father has always had a blind spot when it comes to Ethan. He sees himself in him. All the potential. All the dreams. He's terrified of Ethan failing.
And what about me?
I asked, tears threatening again. Does he even see me at all? Oh, Allie, Mom's voice softened. He sees you as the strong one, the one who doesn't need help. It's not fair, I know. The conversation continued as Mom revealed patterns I'd sensed, but never fully acknowledged. How Dad had paid for Ethan's entire college education while insisting I apply for scholarships and work part-time because you're so responsible. Allie, you'll appreciate it more if you earn it. How my 16th birthday present had been a used Toyota with good gas mileage while Ethan's had been a brand new Jeep because boys are harder on cars. How Dad had dismissed my straight-A report cards with a cursory good job but framed Ethan's C+ English essay because the teacher had called it creative. Why didn't you ever say anything? I asked Mom, hurt that she'd seen this happening but remained silent. I tried in my way, she said quietly. But your father and it's complicated. He's a good man, Allison. He just has blind spots. And he truly believes he's doing what's best for both of you. After hanging up, I pulled out my bank statements from the past 5 years, curiosity driving me to quantify exactly how much I'd financially supported Ethan beyond the apartment money. The list grew quickly. $2,000 loan for Ethan's emergency car repair, never repaid. $1,500 for his business website design, promised to be repaid when the business took off. $800 for a suit for important investor meetings, $3,200 covering his rent when his third business failed, $750 for Samantha's birthday gift when he was temporarily short, plus countless dinners, groceries, and Uber rides I'd covered without thinking twice. The grand total, including the apartment money, exceeded $45,000, almost my entire down payment fund for my own home. I stared at the figure in disbelief. How had I allowed this to happen? Why had I never demanded repayment or even acknowledgement? The next day, I met my best friend Kara for lunch at our favorite Thai place. After listening to the whole story, she put down her fork and looked at me seriously. Allison, you need to confront your father properly. Not at a party, not over the phone. Sit him down with documentation and demand your money back. But he'll just say it was to help family, I protested. He'll make me feel selfish for asking. And that's exactly the pattern you need to break, Kara insisted. Your family has trained you to give and give without expecting anything in return. They've taken advantage of your generosity and responsibility. Deep down, I knew she was right. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect, about being valued as much as my brother. That night, I drafted an email to my father. I kept it businesslike, listing my contribution to the apartment, attaching the bank transfer receipt, and formally requesting repayment within 30 days. I outlined 3 potential repayment plans, showing the same financial acumen I applied at work. No emotional language, no accusations, just facts. My finger hovered over the send button for several minutes before I finally clicked it. A strange mix of anxiety and relief washed over me. I had taken the first step towards standing up for myself, even if it meant disrupting the family dynamic that had been established for decades. The response came within an hour. We'll discuss this Sunday at dinner. 5 p.m. Mom's making pot roast. The battle lines were drawn. Sunday dinner would either begin my financial recovery or permanently damage my relationship with my family. Neither option felt particularly appealing, but doing nothing was no longer an option. Sunday dinner at my parents' house had been a monthly tradition since I moved out after college. Usually, it was a relatively pleasant affair with Mom's cooking, Dad's stories about work, and general catching up. This Sunday felt different from the moment I pulled into the driveway. Dad's truck and Mom's sedan were parked in their usual spots, but Ethan's BMW was there too, along with Samantha's white Mercedes SUV. My stomach tightened. I hadn't expected them to be here, though in retrospect, I should have known Dad would want allies. I'd come prepared. My leather portfolio contained printed bank statements, a copy of the text messages where Dad had explicitly called the apartment a family investment, and a formal letter requesting repayment that I'd had notarized, just in case. Mom opened the door before I could knock, her face tight with anxiety. "They're in the dining room," she whispered, hugging me briefly. "Please try to stay calm, whatever happens." The dining room tableau looked deceptively normal. Dad at the head of the table, Mom's place set at the opposite end, Ethan and Samantha on one side. The empty chair across from them awaited me. Mom's good china and crystal glasses suggested she was trying to maintain a sense of occasion, despite the tension. "There she is," Dad said as I entered, his voice forcefully jovial. "We were just talking about the wedding plans." Samantha nodded coolly, her engagement ring catching the light as she reached for her water glass. Ethan gave me an uncertain smile that didn't reach his eyes. I took my seat, placing my portfolio beside my plate. "I thought we were discussing the apartment situation," I said quietly but firmly. Dad's smile tightened. "We'll get to that. Family dinner comes first. Your mother worked hard on this meal." Mom appeared with the pot roast, and for the next 20 minutes, we engaged in the most strained meal of my life. Samantha discussed wedding venues while I pushed food around my plate. Ethan mentioned a new business contact while Dad nodded approvingly. No one acknowledged the elephant in the room until dessert was served, Mom's apple pie, my usual favorite that I could barely taste. "So," Dad finally said, putting down his fork, "I got your email, Allison. Frankly, I'm disappointed. This isn't how family handles things." I took a deep breath. "How should family handle things, Dad? By making promises they don't intend to keep." His face reddened. "I never promised you ownership of that apartment. I asked for help with a family expense, and you agreed." I opened my portfolio and slid across the printed text messages. "You specifically called it a family investment and said my money wouldn't disappear. You said, and I quote, 'We'll put everything in writing.'" Dad barely glanced at the papers. "Investment in the family's future. In your brother's future. Which benefits everyone. How exactly does giving Ethan a free apartment benefit me?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice level. "Family helps family," Dad said, as if reciting a fundamental truth. "When you needed braces, we paid for them. When you wanted to go to that expensive college, we supported you. I had scholarships for 70% of my tuition, and I worked part-time for the rest," I reminded him. "And braces are basic health care for a child, not a luxury. The point is," Dad continued as if I hadn't spoken, "we don't keep ledgers in this family. Ethan needs this apartment more than you need that money right now. You're doing well, you have a stable job." He's building something from scratch, and Samantha's family has certain expectations. So my financial security is less important than impressing Samantha's parents. The words came out sharper than I intended. Samantha straightened in her chair. Excuse me? This isn't about impressing my parents. It's about Ethan having an appropriate home for us to start our lives together. A home he couldn't afford without significant help, I pointed out. Help that apparently included $30,000 of my money that I was never thanked for, never acknowledged for, and now won't get back. Ethan's expression changed from defensive to confused. Wait, you put money toward the apartment? Dad said. He covered it all. He turned to our father.
Dad.
Dad shifted uncomfortably. I handle the finances. The details aren't important. They are to me, I insisted, then addressed Ethan directly. Dad asked me for help with the down payment. I contributed $30,000 from my savings with the understanding it was a family investment. Then, at your engagement party, he gave you the deed with no mention of my contribution. Ethan looked genuinely shocked. Allie, I had no idea. I swear. Oh, please, Samantha interjected, rolling her eyes. This is obviously about jealousy. You're single, living in that tiny apartment, while Ethan and I are getting married and have a beautiful home. Now you want to rain on our parade with these financial nitpicks. $30,000 is not a nitpick, I replied, my calm facade cracking. It's a significant amount of money that I saved for years to accumulate. Money comes and goes, Dad dismissed. Family is forever. I've helped Ethan because he's needed it. I'd do the same for you, Allison, if you needed it. But that's just it. I do need it. I've been saving for my own place for years, and this has set me back significantly. You're doing fine, Dad insisted. You've always been the responsible one, the self-sufficient one. That's why I know you'll understand that sometimes we need to make sacrifices for those who struggle more. A horrible realization dawned on me. You've been helping Ethan with other expenses too, haven't you? Beyond the apartment. The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. How much, Dad? How much have you given him over the years? Dad's jaw tightened. That's between Ethan and me. Mom, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke up. George, Allison deserves to know. This isn't right. Dad shot her a warning look, but she held her ground. No, George. I've stayed quiet too long. Tell her. After a tense moment, Dad sighed heavily. I've helped Ethan with some business expenses. Startup costs. A few bills when things were tight. And the engagement ring? I pressed, remembering my suspicions. Another uncomfortable silence. Dad paid for half, Ethan admitted quietly, not meeting Samantha's eyes. Apparently, this was news to her too, judging by her expression. And his credit card debt? I continued, recalling conversations where Ethan had mentioned being back on track after mysterious financial troubles had disappeared. That was a one-time situation, Dad defended. He'd made some investments that didn't pan out. The pieces were falling into place. Dad's constant financial bailouts, Ethan's lack of real consequences for his poor decisions, the image of success that had no foundation in reality. You've been enabling him, I said, the words hanging heavy in the air. All these years, you've cushioned every fall, paid for every mistake, while telling me to be responsible and self-sufficient. That's enough, Allison. Dad's voice rose. You've always been selfish, always counting pennies instead of supporting your brother. Family helps family, period. The accusation hit like a physical blow. After everything I'd done, everything I'd contributed, to be called selfish was the final straw. Selfish. I repeated, my voice breaking. I've given Ethan over $45,000 in the past 5 years between the apartment money and other loans that were never repaid. I've put my own goals on hold repeatedly to help him. How dare you call me selfish? 45,000. Ethan echoed, looking pale. That can't be right. I pulled out the itemized list I'd compiled and slid it across to him. Every penny documented, with dates. Ask me about any item on that list, and I can tell you exactly what it was for. Ethan scanned the list, recognition dawning on his face with each line. Ali, I didn't realize it added up to so much. I always meant to pay you back when things turned around. Well, things never seem to turn around because Dad keeps swooping in to save you from any real consequences, I said, the accumulated frustration of years pouring out. You've never had to learn from your mistakes because they've never cost you anything. That's not fair, Samantha interjected. Ethan works incredibly hard. At what? I challenged. His lifestyle coaching business has 3 clients. Before that, it was the crypto venture that mysteriously failed. Before that, the food delivery app that never delivered actual food. What exactly is he working hard at besides spending Dad's money and apparently mine? I will not sit here and be insulted, Samantha declared, throwing her napkin on the table. Ethan, we're leaving. Ethan hesitated, looking between his fiancée and me with genuine conflict on his face. Samantha, wait. I think Ali has some valid points. So you're taking her side? Samantha's voice rose incredulously. It's not about sides, Ethan said, showing an unexpected backbone. It's about the truth. I didn't know about the apartment money. I should have. Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes jump. The apartment is yours, Ethan. End of discussion. If Allison wants to make a federal case out of helping her own brother, that's her choice. But she needs to decide what's more important, money or family. The ultimatum hung in the air. In Dad's mind, I could either drop the issue and maintain family harmony or pursue my money and be branded as greedy and divisive. That's not a fair choice, I said, gathering my documents and standing up. And the fact that you're framing it that way shows exactly what's wrong here. My contributions, financial and otherwise, have never been valued the way Ethan's potential is valued. I'm expected to give without acknowledgement, without thanks, and without repayment, while he receives without appreciation, without responsibility, and without consequences. Tears were streaming down my face now, years of suppressed hurt breaking through. I'm done being the family ATM and receiving nothing but judgment in return. I turned to leave, but Mom caught my arm. Allison, please don't go like this. I'm sorry, Mom, I said, gently removing her hand. I need some time. As I walked toward the front door, I heard quick footsteps behind me. It was Ethan, his expression troubled. Ali, wait, he said, catching up to me on the porch. I had no idea about any of this. The apartment, the money, Dad handled everything. He told me he was taking care of it. For the first time, I saw genuine regret in my brother's eyes. Would it have made a difference if you'd known? I asked. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture from childhood. I'd like to think so. I never meant to take advantage of you, Ali. You're my sister. I love you. For a moment, we stood there in silence, the years of complicated family dynamics between us. I'll pay you back, he finally said. I don't know how yet, but I will. All of it. Before I could respond, the front door opened again and Samantha appeared. Ethan, are you coming? Your father is upset. The brief connection between us faded as Ethan was pulled back into the orbit of expectations and appearances. With a last apologetic look at me, he turned to follow Samantha inside. I drove home in tears for the second time in a week, wondering if the family I thought I had ever truly existed at all. The following weeks were a study in isolation. Dad didn't call, no surprise there. Mom texted daily with variations of, your father will come around, and please don't give up on us, but kept a careful distance, torn between her husband and daughter. Ethan sent a single text the day after the confrontation. I'm sorry, Ali. I'm going to make this right. Then silence. The emotional toll affected every aspect of my life. At work, my performance slipped noticeably. Calculations that once came easily now required double and triple checking. During a presentation to senior management, I blanked on figures I'd reviewed just hours earlier. Janet pulled me aside afterward. Allison, what's going on? This isn't like you at all. I finally broke down and gave her the condensed version. Family financial dispute, significant personal funds at stake, ongoing emotional stress. Take 3 days, she said firmly. Get your head straight. We need the real Allison back. I spent those 3 days consulting with Bryce, a lawyer friend who specialized in contract law. The news wasn't encouraging. Without written documentation, it's basically your word against your father's, Bryce explained over coffee. You could sue, but family lawsuits get ugly fast, and courts are reluctant to get involved in what they see as family gifts without clear evidence to the contrary. So I have no recourse? I asked, heart sinking. I didn't say that. You have social leverage, the family's dirty laundry. Sometimes the threat of exposure is more powerful than legal action. It was small comfort. I didn't want to threaten my family. I wanted acknowledgement and fairness. When I returned to work, I forced myself to compartmentalize, channeling my frustration into productivity. I stayed late, rebuilding my professional reputation one spreadsheet at a time. Colleagues commented on my intensity, but I brushed off their concerns. Work was the one area of my life where effort reliably translated to results. 2 weeks after the Sunday dinner confrontation, I made a disturbing discovery. While reviewing my credit monitoring service alerts, I noticed an inquiry from American Express for a card I didn't apply for. Further investigation revealed that Dad had been paying Ethan's Amex bills, over $4,000 monthly, for the past year. The successful entrepreneur image was entirely smoke and mirrors, financed by our father. The revelation deepened my resolve. This wasn't just about my apartment money anymore. It was about a dysfunctional pattern that was preventing Ethan from ever becoming truly independent and successful on his own terms. A call from Mom broke my self-imposed isolation. Can we meet for lunch tomorrow? Just us. We met at a quiet cafe, halfway between our homes. Mom looked tired, the lines around her eyes deeper than I remembered. Your father won't admit it, she began without preamble, but this situation has him upset too. He doesn't know how to fix it without admitting he was wrong, and that's not something George Taylor does easily. He doesn't need to admit anything, I replied. He just needs to return my money or acknowledge my contribution to the apartment. Mom twisted her napkin anxiously. There's something you don't understand about your father, Allison. Something I should have told you years ago. She revealed that Dad's father had abandoned the family when Dad was 12, leaving them financially destitute. Grandma had worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat, but they'd lost their home, lived in a relative's basement for years, and often went without basics like new shoes or winter coats. Your father swore that his children would never know that kind of insecurity, Mom explained. When Ethan struggled with school, with finding direction, George panicked. He saw his father in Ethan's difficulties, the same restlessness, the same charm without follow-through. He became determined to prevent Ethan from failing, to give him advantages George never had. And me? I asked quietly. What did he see in me? Mom smiled sadly. He saw me, reliable, capable, able to weather storms. He never worried about you the way he worried about Ethan. In his mind, that was a compliment. So, I'm punished for being responsible while Ethan is rewarded for being a perpetual screw-up. The unfairness of it still stung. I'm not justifying it, Mom said, reaching for my hand. I'm just helping you understand. Your father's fears about Ethan failing run deeper than you know. And my contribution to the apartment? Mom sighed. In George's mind, he was protecting both of you. Ethan from failure and you from wasting money on Ethan's mistakes. He convinced himself that giving Ethan full ownership was cleaner and that you'd understand because you've always understood in the past. I absorbed this new perspective, feeling both sympathy for my father's childhood wounds and frustration at how they continued to warp our family dynamics decades later. I love you both, Mom continued. But this pattern isn't healthy. For anyone. Not for you, being taken for granted. Not for Ethan, never learning independence. Not for your father, constantly feeding his fear rather than facing it. The conversation with Mom shifted something in my understanding. My anger remained, but now was directed more at the dysfunctional pattern than at the individuals caught in it. The following evening, Kara came over with wine and takeout. As we sat on my small balcony, she listened to my latest revelations. "You know what you need to do," she said finally. "Stop trying to fix the money problem and address the real issue. Which is, your family needs an intervention. All the financial shuffling is just a symptom of deeper issues. Your dad's childhood trauma, your brother's dependency, your enabling through silence, it's all connected." I considered her words as I sipped my wine. "You think I should just write off the $30,000? No," Kara said firmly. "I think you should make getting that money back contingent on the family acknowledging and addressing the real problems. Otherwise, even if you get your money, nothing will actually change." That night, I researched family therapists and financial counselors, creating a comprehensive plan. If my family was going to heal, we needed professional help breaking patterns established over decades. Meanwhile, Ethan's calls began coming in daily, but I let them go to voicemail, not ready to engage without a clear strategy. His messages became increasingly apologetic and self-aware. "Ali, I've been thinking about everything you said. You were right. I've been living in a bubble, and it's time I took responsibility." Finally, after his 7th call, I answered. "Ethan, I'm not ready to just move on from this." "I know," he said quickly. "I don't expect that. I just want you to know I'm going to pay you back. Somehow." "The money is only part of the problem," I told him. "The real issue is the pattern we're all stuck in." A pause. "I've been thinking about that too. A lot, actually. Samantha and I were having some tough conversations. About reality. About who I really am versus who our parents think I am. About finances." His voice lowered. "She's talking about postponing the wedding until I'm more established. On my own terms." It was the first sign that the confrontation had sparked genuine reflection in my brother. "I know 30 grand is a lot," he continued. "But I promise someday isn't good enough, Ethan," I interrupted. "I need a concrete plan." "I know," he sighed. "I'm working on it. Just don't give up on me yet, okay?" After hanging up, I finalized my strategy. This wasn't about choosing between money and family, as Dad had framed it. It was about redefining what our family could be. One based on honesty, mutual respect, and genuine support rather than fear and appearances. I spent the evening researching family therapists who specialized in financial conflicts and generational patterns. I found one who offered initial consultations over video chat and scheduled an appointment for myself, not yet ready to involve the others, but wanting professional guidance on how to approach them. The time for indirect approaches and quiet acceptance was over. The family needed a complete reset, and I was prepared to be the catalyst, whatever the cost. A week later, I sent a formal email to my parents, Ethan and Samantha. "I'm requesting a family meeting this Saturday at 2 p.m. at Mom and Dad's house. This is not negotiable. I have important information to share that affects all of us. Please confirm your attendance." To my surprise, everyone agreed, without protest. Perhaps they sensed the determination in my tone, or maybe they were all as tired of the tension as I was. I arrived 15 minutes early, setting up my laptop and a small projector I'd borrowed from work in the living room. I had created a detailed PowerPoint presentation, complete with graphs, timelines, and financial projections, approaching the family problem with the same analytical rigor I applied to work projects. Mom greeted me with a nervous hug. "What's all this, Allison?" "Just some visual aids for our discussion," I replied, testing the projector. Dad entered, eyeing the setup warily, but saying nothing. He took his usual armchair, arms crossed defensively. Mom perched on the edge of the sofa, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Ethan and Samantha arrived last. He looked tired, with shadows under his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. Samantha's normally perfect appearance showed signs of strain, her hair pulled back carelessly, her expression tight. Once everyone was seated, I took a deep breath and began. "Thank you all for coming. I've spent the past few weeks doing some research that I think we all need to see." I clicked to the first slide, Taylor Family Financial Flows, 2018 to 2023. A complex diagram showed money moving from Dad to Ethan, from me to Ethan, and occasionally from Dad to me, with exact amounts and dates. This is a visual representation of our family's financial interactions over the past 5 years, I explained. As you can see, there's a clear pattern. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Allison, is this really necessary? Yes, it is, I said firmly. We can't fix what we don't acknowledge. The next slide showed a bar graph comparing the financial assistance Ethan and I had received from our parents since graduating college. The disparity was stark, over $200,000 for Ethan versus less than $20,000 for me, mostly in the form of birthday and Christmas gifts. I'm not showing this to shame anyone, I clarified, noting Dad's reddening face. I'm showing it because this imbalance has created unhealthy dynamics for everyone involved. I clicked through more slides, methodically documenting every loan, gift, and bailout. I included a detailed breakdown of my own contributions to Ethan, culminating in the apartment funds. As you can see, my total financial support to Ethan comes to $47,326.42 over 5 years. The apartment contribution represents the largest single amount at $30,000. Ethan stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Samantha sat rigid beside him, her expression unreadable. But the money itself isn't actually the root problem, I continued, moving to a new section titled Impact Analysis. Here, I'd created a cause and effect flowchart showing how the constant financial bailouts had created a cycle of dependency for Ethan, anxiety for Dad, resentment for me, and enabling behavior from all of us. This pattern has prevented Ethan from experiencing natural consequences and learning from them. It's kept Dad trapped in a cycle of fear about Ethan's success. It's taught me that my contributions, financial and otherwise, are expected but not valued. And it's created a false reality that can't be sustained. Dad finally erupted. This is ridiculous. Turning family into some kind of corporate analysis. You've always been cold with your spreadsheets and calculations, Allison, but this takes it too far. George, Mom interjected quietly. Let her finish. I remained calm, having anticipated this reaction. Dad, I understand this is uncomfortable, but sometimes we need to see patterns objectively before we can change them. I continued to my proposed solutions slide, which included 1. Formal acknowledgement of my contribution to the apartment. 2. A structured repayment plan for the $30,000. 3. Financial counseling for Ethan. 4. Family therapy to address underlying patterns. 5. Full financial transparency going forward. These aren't punishments, I emphasized. They're steps toward healthier relationships for all of us. Dad stood abruptly. I've heard enough. This is. Dad, please, Ethan interrupted, surprising everyone. Let's hear her out. I think Allie's right about a lot of this. Dad stared at Ethan in disbelief. You're taking her side? It's not about sides, Ethan said, echoing his words from our previous confrontation. It's about the truth. And the truth is, I've been living in a bubble, supported by money I didn't earn and achievements I didn't actually achieve. Samantha shifted beside him, and he turned to her. You know it's true, Sam. We've been talking about it all week. Samantha cleared her throat. Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, Ethan and I have been having some difficult conversations lately. About our future. She twisted her engagement ring nervously. I think we need to postpone the wedding. The bombshell landed in silence. Dad sank back into his chair, visibly shocked. What are you talking about? He finally managed. I love Ethan, Samantha continued, but I've realized I fell in love with a version of him that isn't entirely real. The successful entrepreneur, the independent businessman, that's not where he actually is right now. And I need him to become that person for real, not just on paper, before we get married. Ethan reached for her hand. It's the right decision, Dad. I need to stand on my own 2 feet, really stand, not just pretend while you prop me up financially. Dad's face had gone from red to alarmingly pale. He tugged at his collar, his breathing becoming labored. George. Mom was beside him instantly. George, what's wrong? Nothing, he gasped. Just need a minute. But the grimace of pain on his face told a different story. Within moments, it became clear this was more than stress or anger. Call 911. Mom shouted, and Samantha was already dialing, her voice steady as she reported possible heart attack symptoms. The family presentation I'd so carefully planned dissolved into chaos. Dad was loaded into an ambulance while Mom rode with him, leaving Ethan, Samantha, and me standing in the driveway, the family's financial secrets temporarily eclipsed by more immediate concerns. "This is my fault," I whispered, watching the ambulance disappear down the street. "I pushed too hard." "No," Ethan said firmly, putting an arm around my shoulders. "If anyone's to blame, it's me. I've been the center of all this drama, the reason for all this stress." We followed in my car to Providence Hospital, where Dad was immediately taken to the cardiac unit. Hours of tense waiting followed, with minimal updates from overworked nurses. Mom emerged occasionally with red-rimmed eyes, but little information. Finally, around 8 p.m., a doctor approached our huddled group in the waiting room. "Mrs. Taylor, your husband is stable." It wasn't a heart attack, but rather a severe anxiety episode that mimicked cardiac symptoms. "We're keeping him overnight for observation and running some additional tests, but he should be able to go home tomorrow." The collective relief was palpable. Mom went back to sit with Dad while Ethan, Samantha, and I retreated to the hospital cafeteria for much-needed coffee. "I never meant for this to happen," I said, staring into my styrofoam cup. "I just wanted everyone to see the truth." "The truth can be painful," Ethan acknowledged, "but necessary." We sat in silence for a moment before Ethan spoke again. "There's something else you should know, Allie. About the apartment." I looked up, questioning. "The deed, it hasn't actually been transferred yet. Dad gave me the envelope at the engagement party, but inside was just a letter saying the deed would be transferred after the wedding. Some kind of tax timing thing." This revelation hit me like a physical shock. "So, technically, the apartment isn't in your name yet?"
No.
"It's still in Dad's name. He just made the announcement for effect." The irony was almost too much. All this conflict over a deed that hadn't even changed hands. When we were allowed to see Dad later that evening, he looked diminished in the hospital bed, monitoring wires attached to his chest, his usual commanding presence subdued by a hospital gown and the humbling environment. "Dad," I began tentatively, "I'm so sorry about today. I never meant to cause this." He waved away my apology with a weak hand. "Not your fault, Allie. Doctor says I've been ignoring stress symptoms for months. This was coming one way or another." He gestured for me to come closer, his voice lowered. "Your presentation, it was eye-opening. Painful, but eye-opening." I blinked in surprise. "Really? I've spent my life trying to be different from my father," he continued. "He abandoned us, left us with nothing. I swore I'd always be there for my kids, always make sure they had what they needed." His eyes filled with tears, something I'd never seen before. But I think I've been so focused on not repeating his mistakes that I made completely different ones. I've enabled Ethan instead of empowering him. And I've taken you for granted because you reminded me of your mother, strong, capable, never needing to be rescued. Mom, who had been sitting quietly by his bedside, reached over to squeeze his hand. "We both made mistakes, George." Dad looked at me directly. "The apartment, you're right about your contribution. It wasn't fair to cut you out. And the truth is..." He hesitated, glancing at Mom, who nodded encouragingly. "The truth is, the construction business has been struggling for the past year. I gave away money I couldn't really afford to give." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Dad's excessive generosity toward Ethan wasn't just about favoritism or childhood trauma. It was a facade, an attempt to maintain the image of the successful patriarch even as his own business faltered. "Why didn't you tell us?" I asked. "Pride," he admitted simply. "I couldn't bear for either of you to see me fail." In that moment, the family mythology we'd all been living within began to crumble. My father wasn't the infallible provider he'd pretended to be. Ethan wasn't the successful entrepreneur he'd been portrayed as. And I wasn't the cold, calculating daughter I'd been labeled as for questioning the narrative. We were just people, flawed, frightened, and finally facing the truth. 2 weeks after Dad's health scare, we gathered for our first official family therapy session. Dr. Moira Fleming, a specialist in family systems and financial conflicts, had agreed to take us on after I'd explained our situation. Her office was neutral territory. No one had the home court advantage that had often influenced our previous discussions. Dad had been reluctant initially, but Mom had put her foot down in a way I'd rarely seen before. This isn't optional, George. Not if you want to heal this family and your health. We sat in a semicircle facing Dr. Fleming, Dad and Mom on one end, Ethan in the middle, and me on the other end. Samantha had chosen not to participate, feeling this was a core family issue that needed resolving before she could re-engage with Ethan's family dynamics. I want to start by acknowledging the courage it takes for families to seek help, Dr. Fleming began. You're already showing tremendous strength by being here. For the next 90 minutes, Dr. Fleming guided us through a structured conversation about our perceptions and experiences. We each shared our version of the family narrative, often with surprising differences in how we remembered key events. Dad struggled visibly when his turn came. I thought I was doing the right thing, he said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Supporting Ethan because he needed it more. Pushing Allison to be independent because she was capable of it. But I see now that I created an unfair dynamic. And how do you feel about that realization, George? Dr. Fleming prompted. Dad looked at me, his eyes damp, ashamed, and sad that it took Allison reaching her breaking point, and my health crisis, for me to see it. We established concrete goals for our therapy. Addressing the apartment situation, creating healthier financial boundaries, improving communication, and processing the emotional patterns that had defined our relationships for decades. As we left that first session, Dad pulled me aside in the parking lot. I want you to know, I've instructed my lawyer to add your name to the apartment deed, reflecting your contribution. It's the right thing to do. The acknowledgement meant more than the money ever could, though I appreciated both. Thank you, Dad. After 3 more weekly sessions, Ethan made a surprising announcement. I've decided to sell the apartment. What? Dad looked genuinely shocked. But we just sorted out the ownership issue. That's exactly why, Ethan explained. Now that it's properly acknowledged as partly Allison's, the right thing to do is sell it, pay her back her investment plus interest, and use whatever's left as a proper down payment on a place Samantha and I can truly afford on our own. I stared at my brother, barely recognizing this new, responsible version of him. Ethan, are you sure? That's a beautiful apartment. It's a beautiful apartment I didn't earn, he replied simply. And living there would be a constant reminder of the old patterns we're trying to break. Dad started to protest but caught himself. This was the old pattern. Dad trying to solve problems for Ethan, trying to preserve the image he'd created rather than allowing Ethan to make his own choices and learn from them. If that's what you want, son, he said finally. It's your decision. And Allison's, since she's part owner now. I nodded my agreement. I think it's a good decision, Ethan. The apartment went on the market the following week. Meanwhile, other changes were unfolding. Ethan had taken a job at a friend's marketing firm. An entry-level position with a modest but steady salary. It was the first conventional job he'd held since college, and though it lacked the glamour of entrepreneur, it came with something more valuable, legitimate income and the opportunity to learn a business from the ground up rather than attempting to launch one with no experience. Dad was seeing a cardiologist regularly and had brought in a partner to help manage the construction business, reducing his stress and hours. Mom had started attending a support group for spouses of cardiac patients, where she was finding her voice in ways that began to translate to our family dynamics as well. I found myself processing complex emotions, vindication mixed with sadness for what our family could have been if we'd addressed these issues years earlier. In our 5th therapy session, I broke down when discussing this loss. I feel like we wasted so many years maintaining this facade, I sobbed. Dad pretending the business was thriving when it wasn't. Ethan pretending to be successful when he was struggling. Me pretending I was okay with being taken for granted when I was building up resentment. We could have been genuinely supporting each other instead of supporting these false images. But you're not wasting any more time, Dr. Fleming pointed out gently. That's the victory here. Many families never break through these patterns. She was right, of course. And there were moments of genuine connection emerging that felt entirely new. Dad called to ask my advice about a business decision, valuing my financial expertise for the first time. Ethan and I had lunch weekly, rebuilding our sibling relationship on more honest footing. Mom began sharing her own dreams and plans rather than focusing solely on mediating between the rest of us. The apartment sold more quickly than expected, benefiting from a neighborhood development project that had increased property values. After repaying my $30,000 plus 3 years' worth of interest, Ethan was left with enough for a modest down payment on a smaller condo that better reflected his actual financial situation. Dad began treating me with a new respect, making efforts to acknowledge my achievements and contributions that had previously been overlooked. At a family dinner, now held at a restaurant to remove the pressure from Mom, he raised a toast to my recent work promotion. To Allison, he said, holding up his glass of sparkling water, alcohol now restricted by his doctor, whose financial acumen I should have appreciated much sooner, and whose strength and integrity I deeply admire. The words brought tears to my eyes. It was the acknowledgement I'd been seeking for years, not just for my money, but for my character and contributions. Even Samantha and I developed a cautious rapport. With the wedding postponed indefinitely and Ethan working toward genuine independence, their relationship had entered a more honest phase. Samantha admitted to me over coffee that she'd been attracted to the image of Ethan as a successful businessman partly because it matched her parents' expectations. I'm learning to separate what I actually want from what I think I should want, she confessed. Ethan is doing the same thing. It's painful but necessary. That's the theme of our family these days, I replied with a small smile. Painful but necessary truths. The family's transformation wasn't perfect or complete. Dad still occasionally slipped into old patterns of trying to direct everyone's lives. Mom sometimes reverted to peacemaking rather than truth-telling when tensions arose. Ethan had moments of entitlement and expectation, and I sometimes retreated into cold analysis when emotions became overwhelming. But we were trying. We were seeing each other clearly, for perhaps the first time, and we were establishing new boundaries and patterns that allowed each of us to be authentic rather than playing the roles we'd been assigned. When I received the check from the apartment sale, I felt a sense of closure that went beyond the financial resolution. This wasn't just about the money, it was about recognition, respect, and the beginning of a healthier family system. 6 months after that fateful engagement party, I stood in the lobby of a modest 2-story building in the Riverdale neighborhood, keys in hand, surrounded by my family. The grand opening banner fluttered in the spring breeze as a small crowd gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The $30,000 from the apartment sale, combined with my savings and a small business loan, had been enough to purchase this property. Not for myself to live in, as everyone had assumed, but for something entirely different. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the gathered crowd, which included local media and community representatives. Welcome to the opening of Cornerstone Housing, affordable apartments for single parents working to build financial stability. The idea had come to me during a therapy session when Dr. Fleming had asked what financial security meant to me. I realized it wasn't just about having money. It was about creating stability and opportunity. Our family conflict had revealed how money could be both a tool for control and a pathway to independence, depending on how it was used. The building contained 6 apartment units, renovated to be comfortable, energy efficient, and affordable. Tenants would receive not just housing but access to financial literacy workshops and career development resources, tools to build true independence rather than dependency. Cornerstone was born from my own journey with family, finances, and finding purpose. I continued. Sometimes life's greatest challenges lead to unexpected gifts if we're willing to learn from them. I glanced at my family standing in the front row. Dad, looking healthier than he had in years, nodded with unmistakable pride. Real pride, not the performance of pride he'd often shown toward Ethan's ventures. Mom wiped away tears, beaming. Ethan stood with his arm around Samantha, both of them looking at me with genuine admiration. After cutting the ribbon, I gave tours of the facility, including the community room where financial literacy classes would be held and the small playground we'd installed in the back. Dad approached me as the crowd began to disperse. Allison, this is extraordinary. You've created something meaningful out of what started as a family conflict. I'm so proud of you. Those words, I'm proud of you, spoken with authentic emotion rather than obligatory acknowledgement, meant everything. I had good teachers, I replied. Even the painful lessons taught me something valuable. The most surprising development had been Ethan's involvement in the project. Once the apartment sold and he'd repaid my investment, he'd approached me with an unexpected offer. I want to help with your housing project, he'd said. I'm not much use with finances, but I do know design and marketing. Let me contribute that way. And he had. Ethan had created beautiful brochures highlighting the program, designed the website, and used his networking skills to secure donations of furniture and appliances from local businesses. It was the first time we'd truly collaborated as equals, each contributing our strengths without competition or resentment. Dad had contributed too, offering construction expertise when we encountered structural issues during renovation. Mom had organized a volunteer day to paint and decorate the community room. Even Samantha had helped, using her connections to arrange media coverage of the opening. As I handed keys to Tracy, a single mother of two, and our first tenant, the symbolism wasn't lost on me. Keys represented access, opportunity, and independence, everything I'd fought for in my confrontation with my family. This apartment is beautiful, Tracy said, her eyes wide as she explored the sunny two-bedroom unit. I never thought I'd be able to afford a safe place like this in a good school district. That's exactly why Cornerstone exists, I told her. Everyone deserves a foundation to build from. Later, as we celebrated with a small reception in the community room, I found myself standing slightly apart, watching my family interact with the tenants and community partners. Dad was explaining the energy-efficient windows to a local council member. Mom was helping a tenant's child with a plate of cookies. Ethan was enthusiastically describing the financial literacy program to a reporter. They weren't perfect. None of us were, but they were authentic now in a way they hadn't been before. The facade had crumbled, revealing flawed but genuine people trying their best to grow and connect. Samantha approached, handing me a glass of sparkling cider. This is really amazing, Allison. You've created something truly special. Thanks, I replied. It's not what I originally planned to do with that money, but I think it's better. She nodded thoughtfully. Ethan and I are learning that sometimes the unexpected path is the right one. We're talking about scaling back our wedding plans significantly, something small and meaningful instead of showy. That sounds perfect, I said and meant it. The journey from that devastating moment at the engagement party to this day of celebration had been neither straight nor easy. There had been painful therapy sessions where decades-old wounds were reopened. There had been setbacks when old patterns briefly reasserted themselves. There had been moments when I wondered if healing was truly possible. But standing in this building that represented both my financial independence and my commitment to helping others achieve theirs, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. The betrayal that had initially felt like the end of my world had instead become the catalyst for transformation, not just for me, but for my entire family. As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the windows of the community room, Dad clinked his glass for attention. I'd like to propose a toast, he said, his voice steady but emotional. To Allison, who had the courage to speak truth even when it was difficult, the wisdom to channel pain into purpose, and the compassion to create opportunity for others. You've taught this old man that true family strength comes not from maintaining appearances, but from facing reality together. We raised our glasses as I blinked back tears. The journey wasn't over. Real growth never is, but we had found our way to a new beginning, one built on truth rather than illusion. What's your story of family financial conflict? Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to positive change? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Remember to like, subscribe, and share if this story resonated with you. Sometimes the most painful moments in our lives become the doorways to our greatest growth. Thank you for being part of this journey, and I hope my story brings perspective or comfort to anyone facing similar challenges with their own family.